Sorry about that, Victor. All right, we are ready to start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are here for a school board work session. It's been scheduled today for the purpose of discussing the following board policies. B, which is school governance, BB, board elections, BDC, board officers, BE, school board meetings, BEC, executive sessions, BEDH, public input at school board meetings, and BIE, board members' insurance policy. And we will also be discussing the ESE audit plan. We'll have a presentation from our auditor, and I think some members of our ESE staff as well. Yes, I see Dr. Gesundheit in the back. The public will not have an opportunity to participate. Let me pull this down for a minute. My trick didn't work. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because it is not a regularly scheduled board meeting and no action will be taken. And there will be no pre-agenda period for public comment. So, but the issues that we are discussing will come forward. Any changes that we make to these policies will come forward in a future rule development workshop where we will solicit public input because that is very important to this board before we make any changes to our board policies. Board members are attending both telephonically and in person, so I'm going to do a quick roll call. Let me begin with Member Gallo.
Here, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Lopez.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Cobert is en route and should be joining us in just a minute, but she is not currently present. Vice Chair Gould.
Present.
Member Felder.
I'm here.
Dr. Casterdental.
Good afternoon.
Member Byrd.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. All right, so all members except for Member Cobert are present and accounted for. Let me suggest, because Vice Chair Gould is not in the chambers with us and it's hard to chair the meeting in the event that I need to excuse myself for some reason, so I will entertain a motion to appoint a interim vice chair for this meeting only.
I move to appoint Member Cobert.
Okay, that was Vice Chair Gould, correct? No. Who
No,
was
but
that?
I'm going to second
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Who made that motion?
That was me.
Oh, that was you. I'm sorry, Member
You can't see
Casterdental.
because I have a mask on.
I know, it didn't even move. And I knew that Vice Chair Gould had tried to do this before I even opened the meeting. So we have a motion from Member Casterdental, and we have a second from Vice Chair Gould to have as temporary or acting Vice Chair for this meeting, Member Cobert, when she arrives. I also want to remind the public that we will not be engaging in electronic or digital communication during the meeting. So if you wish to reach board members, I encourage you to do that either before or after the meeting. Any emails you send us, obviously we will respond after the meeting, but we won't be monitoring those during the meeting. To my fellow board members, and let me just remind everyone here to speak directly into your microphone. And I also want to take a moment before we rise for the moment of silence to just recognize the tragedies that our nation continues to experience. Last week in Atlanta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta, Georgia, the tragedies in 3 spas. I don't know that we'll ever know for certain what the intent was and if it was racially motivated. While we may never know, I do know that members of our Asian American community here and across the nation are feeling threatened, and beyond threatened, I think kind of questioning where is our country in terms of our unity. So I would urge all of us to take this opportunity to reach out to friends that we have that are Asian American and to look for every opportunity in your day-to-day life to support, be kind beyond what you need to be or would normally be, not only to members of our Asian American community, but to all of the people that you come in contact with. And then, of course, yesterday's tragedy in Boulder, Colorado. Just absolutely shocking again. And I think, I speak candidly, what troubles me so much is a 21-year-old to bring about so much carnage, so much hatred at such an early age. I think over and over again that our work towards youth mental health is so fundamentally important that we have to figure out what is going on with our children, and we in public education have an opportunity that no other public entity has in our entire country, because we have such connection with our youth, and so many of them do come up through our public schools. And we have to find a way to identify, to connect, to relate, to support, to rechannel, and to do everything that we can to prevent these tragedies, because almost every one of these young men who perpetrate such vicious, hurtful destruction of lives and families and communities, almost every one of them came up through the public education system, which is not to say that's the fault. I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute, but we do have an opportunity to be part of the solution. Let me recognize Member Felder before we go to.
I'm so glad, School Board Chair Jacobs, that you did talk about it and make mention. And as public educators, we do understand we never know exactly who we're teaching in our classrooms. So, which is the excellent opportunity for us to be on our best behavior in terms of our jobs as teachers and listeners and whatever, because you don't know that one nice thing you say, that one time you tell a kid that it's not as bad as you think it is, you may have stopped his mind or her mind from going in a direction that 10 years from today, that they will be thinking of those kinds of things. But what I wanted to say, and I don't know the tradition of the district in terms of being on the board, I just got on the board, but during my tenure as a teacher at OCPS, every April was a time that I recognized Asian Americans. I'd spent a summer in India on a Fulbright scholarship, so and then I spent a summer teaching in Taiwan and Hong Kong while I was at Dr. Phillips. So when I came back to the regular teaching, I did recognize, like I did in October, my Latinos and Hispanic, and of course February, Black History. In April was the time, because I did something with Buddy Dyer in the city of Orlando some years ago. They call it Asian Awareness Month, but I don't know how that can work out, but hopefully at some point, maybe, have to, think about it or whatever, take it up with the board in the month of April, that we do some type of recognition, not because of what has happened, but because of what has never happened. You understand what I'm saying? Just to do that, I would just want to do that.
No, we
And
will
that was the
definitely.
month years ago when I was teaching and working with the city of Orlando. They use that month, April, as to recognize their accomplishments and what they've done. So that's just something I wanted to mention.
Absolutely, we will definitely do that in the month of April, and I think reaching out to some of our Asian American organizations and inviting them to be part, either physically or calling in, would be helpful and meaningful as well. Thank you for that suggestion. All right, if you will all join us in a moment of thoughtful reflection, or in some of our cases, mind prayer, and then we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right, as I mentioned, we are going to begin with our policies. And let me begin by turning the podium or the floor over to Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As already noted, this is the time for us to once again review our B policies. Staff have been in touch with board members to get some input. This is another opportunity for feedback on the B policies which govern your work here. Your General Counsel, Amy Enville, has taken the lead in the absence of one of her associates. Ms. Enville.
Thank you. Superintendent, Madam Chair, we are here today. Today is work session number 4 with respect to these 7 board policies. We had one on December 1st, 2020, one on January 5th, 2021, one on February 16th, 2021, and then we're here today. So a lot of the stuff that's on these revisions you have already seen. There were a couple highlights that we were going to go over again. I took the time to listen to your meeting again on the 16th and to make the changes that were suggested. I think I captured the majority of them. I since have had some extra not public comment, but input from board members that I also would like to discuss with you as we go through. I think probably the easiest way is just to start at the beginning and go through like we did last time. I think we were okay with policy B, which is your school board governance. That was just mainly terminology changes. And if you want to stop me at any time, we can do that. What I did add to board policy B is we had talked about the least every 2 years we're meeting, but then we talked about an annual board accountability and assessment meeting. So I added that here into subsection E. And we didn't, of course, if there's a pandemic or something that you have to waive it, it gives you the opportunity to waive that. But the board had discussed that you wanted that annual meeting. In subsection F, we took out the word retreat and left it at annual planning sessions. We wanted to make sure it's not a treat. We're not going to a spa. Any questions on that one, that particular section? No, we're okay with that? Okay.
Ms. Enville, for some reason, I am not able to open the document I sent myself in the normal format.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anybody who might be able to help me with that. I can't open it, darn it, on my iPad.
I think we'll have some tech support over
Yeah.
here for you.
Thank you. So I'm trying to go off of memory, but thanks. So I want it to open like that where I can see my track changes and stuff. But it doesn't look anything like that. How do I get it to look like a Word document with track changes? It says it's in Word, right? Yeah, it's opened in Word. Just doesn't look like anything like Word. While we work on this, I will try to follow along and see if I can remember the changes, okay?
Okay. So moving forward, the next portion that received some additional changes after we had met is on the board established advisory committees. I had indicated that I thought we had a policy about board established advisory committees, and I could not find one. So
now I should be able to get to
this now, the way it was written before, it was a little confusing as to what a board committee was and what an advisory committee was. I checked some other school districts, and they had some pretty robust board advisory committee policies. I'm always hesitant to put a lot of procedure into policy, but there are now 2 sections in Board Policy B, one titled Board Established Advisory Committees, which would be like your, I'm trying to think, your Medical Advisory Committee, your OCPS Mental Health Commission, those kind of things. And then there's another subsection underneath here that is about your subcommittees of the board, and that would be your legislative and your budget. I didn't know if you wanted me to go over these
Yes,
and
Emma.
read them to you.
Can we go back
Sure.
now that I've got this
Yep.
document up? If we could go back to the policy having to do with the chair.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the language at the beginning, the chair,
Mm-hmm.
what is it?
The chair ensures.
Ensures
Mhm.
the integrity.
Mhm.
I think it should say shall endeavor to ensure. I know that's being picky, but there's, there's not, I can ensure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can try.
I'm good with that.
If you would do that. And then the first 2 bullets under that say
Mhm.
assure, and they should be ensure.
Ensure. Mm-hmm.
As I said, most of my comments are not like
Nope.
material, they're just.
Let's do them now.
Yeah, so, and thank you for a moment to go back. Okay, you got rid of delegating, remaining responsible, thank you. And, under advisory, where you are right now,
Under advisory.
the advisory committees.
Mm-hmm.
The second bullet says that the advisory committees are intended to provide recommendations from a community perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This would normally not have jumped out at me, but when we formed the Mental Health Commission and the Medical Advisory Commission, there was some debate about whether we had geographic representation.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's always a nice thing to strive for, and we always try to make sure that we have diversity of backgrounds and opinions, but on some of these are technical boards
Mm-hmm.
where we're really striving for expertise. So I thought that we should strike the requirement that it have a community perspective, because in some cases we're really looking for a medical perspective
Mm-hmm.
rather than a community perspective. Community suggests we want community input, opinions as opposed to fact-based.
Mm-hmm. So do you want me to take out that whole entire first sentence?
No, I would just take out the words from a community perspective.
Okay.
And I think the rest is just fine without it.
Okay.
And again, had we not had that discussion, it would not have,
Mhm.
wouldn't have occurred to me. Okay.
I think that's good.
And the only
then-
other question I had on this section, I think, was the wholeness, reinforce the wholeness. Hello, Vice Chair.
There she is.
Reinforce the wholeness of the board's job. What does that mean exactly?
It's what I borrowed from another district. That's why you're here now, so you can
Okay,
wordsmith
so
it for
you know
me.
what I thought would work fine here? Board established, what is it? Board advisory committees, when used, will be used to support the work of the board and never to interfere with the delegation on authority from the board to the superintendent. I think that's really what we're trying to get at,
Mhm.
trying to make sure that these bodies don't think,
Actually, the wholeness is what was in your current policy.
oh, I know,
Yeah.
I
So,
didn't
yeah.
understand it then.
I don't know.
I was just suggesting we take out "and to reinforce the wholeness of the board's job."
Okay.
I think we still, I think it's a little more succinct and a little more plain English and clear. Any, were you through with the advisory
I'm
board?
No, trying
Anybody
to
else
walk-
have any comments? I feel like the screen should be up. I feel lost. This, does everybody know this screen is not up? It should be up. No, this is usually up so I can see who's speaking. Yeah, but I think that, hey, Victor, somebody, I think my screen usually tells me who's queued up, and I'm looking around trying to figure out, you know how you, this tells me to raise and lower the mics or the podium. But it's so weird because I'm just used to coming in and things work, and I know if something's wrong. I would not know who's queued. Sorry. This normally gives me my cue. So I have to always look at y'all's to see where we are, because this. Check with what? You'll check with Victor? Good, thank you. In the meantime, if you all want to be recognized, If you push the button, I'm not going to see it. So I just need you to raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, just jump in. Or if you're raising the hand and I'm not catching you, just say, excuse me.
Chair.
So, Member Byrd, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I think my only comment on this section is I feel like it's a little redundant, some of the bullets. Like number 7. It's like, again, saying we establish these committees to support the work of the board. And I feel like that's already been kind of stated in the first one. And kind of the second one. I don't know. I feel like I understand like the first one, I think is more talking about, that they're created by a resolution, which I understand that. But then I just feel like there's a lot of kind of redundancy in having so many bullets about this committee. But that's just.
I'm looking for, I agree with you. When I read this section, I thought to myself, there must have been big problems at some point, that it was necessary to kind of hammer this point home again. And that doesn't mean there won't be big problems in the future. This is a really good board, very high functioning, very focused on what our job is. And we understand the distinction. It should be clear in our policies, but it doesn't have to be redundantly clear. Sometimes the more you write, the less impact what you write has. So, Ms. Envol, is that something you can take a shot at?
I can.
Okay. Anybody on the line? Any of our 3 board members on the line have anything they want to provide in terms of input on this issue at this time? Okay, great.
Okay.
Ms. Envol.
All right, moving forward. So now we have the board subcommittees portion. And that was, you asked to add a definition. Board subcommittees may be established from time to time by the board. Each board subcommittee shall consist of 2 or more board members, and all board members are eligible to serve on the board subcommittee, and all board members are welcome to attend meetings, which shall be properly noticed. That's what we do anyway, but I thought it was important to put it in policy. A board subcommittee may be established only if its existence and charge come from the board, and its work is intended to support the board's work. And then I remember that the board provided direction that you wanted a legislative and a budget subcommittee. So I left that in there. And then the board had directed last time to create it. And when you do it, establish what the purpose is, establish the number of members that will serve, who will appoint the members, the board subcommittee, the length of time the subcommittee will meet, or that it'll exist, and then also you asked that the chair will appoint a board subcommittee chair on an annual basis. And also I thought it was important to reiterate that we're going to operate in accordance with the Sunshine Law.
Question?
Member Castrodental.
Thank you. I'm looking in at this again, and I didn't think about it until just now, so I apologize for that. But do we need to be concerned about how that subcommittee operates? Like if there is an issue that they're looking at and they vote on something, or if other members who are not members of the committee come and they attend the meeting, do they get a vote, or do we not need to worry about that process?
Member Castrodental, actually, before Ms. Envol, when I read this, I thought that it probably could be a little more clear that we'll have specific members. Other board members might come, but I agree with you, when they come, they're not automatically part of the committee. And so we probably should define that, because I think that even though we're talking about it, could be clear. I don't think that's going to be clear in the future. We had the same thing.
Yes, and then if it's a committee of 2, how do they, how do they come to a decision of 2? It just, okay, COVID.
Yeah,
looks
we
like she
try
has an
very
idea.
hard not to have 2. We have
Okay.
at least 3 so we can
I
break
don't
the
know.
tie. It will be a sunshine meeting. All these meetings will be a sunshine meeting. Member Colbert.
Just to shed a little light on past practice, generally when we have the subcommittees, which in my experience have typically been the budget and legislative, There's also communication, which is very important, like when we're having the renewal for the 1 mil or half penny. Generally, the committee comes together. Any board member can be member of the committee. There's usually staff. And they are able to come to a consensus and make a recommendation to the board as a whole. They don't vote to do anything outside the board as a whole. It's just a way to sort of get the work done in a smaller group and come and make the recommendation to the full board.
Member Casterdown.
That's great. Can that be outlined in the policy? Just that simple method?
Let me go back, though, to what I
Chair.
thought your question was. Just a moment, Vice Chair, I'll call you in just a minute. Let me clarify one thing.
Sure.
I think one of your questions was if you have a committee, and say it's 3 members of the board, and they've been coming for 6 months, and at a meeting when they're about to make a recommendation, a 4th member comes, hasn't been participating, is that person automatically a member of the committee, and do they vote? Or is there a structured group of board members that are on the committee, and additional people can come, participate in dialogue, but not vote? Can you address that, and then I'll go to Vice Chair.
Yeah, so in the past, I have not been a member of the budget committee. That one has certain numbers specified, members of CTA, OSPA, and members of the board. However, I attend. Sometimes I'm asked to give input, but I'm not a voting member. So if I'm not a member of the committee, you're not voting to make that recommendation.
Thank you. That was what I thought was part of your initial question. Vice Chair Gould, or Member Gould today.
Thank you. Member Colbert kind of outlined it. I think there's a distinction in how committees play out. Certainly, if we're having a communications committee meeting, any of the members of the board that were in attendance, whether they are officially members or not, but we kind of consider all members to be members of that. That's why we invite everybody, give input. But in bargained or in appointed representation to either one of our subcommittees or an external board like the Community Action Board or something like that, that would be the distinction of when there is more of a limit or a job that a particular board member needs to fulfill. So I don't know if we could define it that way, just to tease out a little bit more of what Member Colbert overviewed.
Ms. Envol, that's pretty clear, right? But I think it does need a little language. I know, I'm trying to remember what committee, but when I first got elected, I attended a meeting and assumed because I could come, right? I think a couple of us there, we could come so we could participate, and then we didn't know that we weren't really members. So we'll try to be more clear about that in terms of when they're appointed, and we're all part of that process, but the policy, if it can reflect that, would be beneficial.
Yes.
Any other comments? And I'm trying so hard to get on so that I can see those of you on the phone, but I'm having problems with that. So do like my Vice Chair did and just jump in. Okay, no comments. Ms. Envol.
Okay. I'll make those changes. It's just
Thank
going to be
you.
easier to do it without having you wait for me to do that.
No, yeah, definitely.
Moving forward, next section was annual agenda planning. You asked that I added as referenced in governance style 2E above, and if part of the annual board accountability and assessment meeting, I added that language in there again. And we added language into about the strategic plan. But we did that last time together. Any questions about that particular section?
Nope.
Okay.
Keep going.
Moving forward, board members' code of conduct. These were minor changes for consistency. And we talked about, I think the first meeting or maybe the second one, talked about respectfully voicing opposing opinions. So that didn't have any discussion much in
I
the
do
last
have
meeting.
one
Sure.
suggested
Mhm.
clarification on that. And I also, for the board members at the dais, this screen is back up. So the buttons will work. And Dr. Jenkins is looking over her left shoulder every now and then to let me know if somebody on the phone wants to speak. I don't know what's over her left shoulder, but it seems to be working. So the one thing that I would change in this, if I had the ability, we discussed the idea that board members didn't have to support the decision, but we still call this support. board decisions, and I think the better term would be respect board decisions in the title of it, because we changed the language within that section to say that we will acknowledge the decision and we might respectfully voice opposing opinions, so I think it's respecting the decisions. Is there any objection with considering that change? Might have somebody on the call. Do we have one of our, I heard a click, okay. Any other comments on this section? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward.
Okay. Moving down, process for addressing board member violations. Those were mainly terminology changes. And then membership of the school board was essentially to just clean it up a little bit and make sure it's in accordance with the statute. I actually added the 2 statutes down there. We didn't have those before. The one that specifically allows Orange County to have 8. Thought that was important to include.
Yes.
Organization and officers, we didn't make a lot of changes the last time, but this is where we talked about having a vice chair, and then the past vice chair serve as the vice chair in the event that you needed to do that. Then I renumbered the sections just so they're all in order. Moving on to board policy BE, which is your school board meetings.
Ms. Envol, can I
Yes.
interrupt you for just a minute?
Yeah.
'Cause we might have gotten to it, or maybe. The one where we de facto go to the previous vice chair, is that coming up, or did we just?
It's here.
It's here, but it hasn't come up yet. Okay, thank you. Have we covered that? Because I did have a change that.
That might have been up in the chair section. Hang on just a second.
Yeah, this is about the chair not being able.
Hang on. Going back up.
I might have missed it when we went past it.
I'm thinking it was up here. There. In the event of the chair's absence, the vice chair shall fulfill the role of the chair as described herein. In the event of the vice chair's absence, the vice chair from the previous year shall fulfill the role of the chair as described herein.
Okay, again, being a little nitpicky, I know, but sometimes we have a vice chair for more than 1 year. In this case, we do. So the previous year, if Member Gould was not here, the previous year would still be Member Gould. So I don't know if this is correct term or not, but we want the most recently, what did I come up with? Immediate past chair, or immediate preceding chair, or vice chair, yeah. As opposed to last year's.
From the immediate. What'd you say, immediate? I'm sorry. Immediate
I
past?
wrote, and this may not be good language, immediate preceding vice chair, but Member Colbert just mentioned immediate past. That, which I think is better language.
That was.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good at nitpicking. Except for when I write something, and then it's full of mistakes. All right.
It is, and I don't take any pride
Listen-
of ownership
listen
in
to
any
her.
of this.
Do you
so.
hear what she just said? I
What?
said, when I write something, it's full of mistakes, and she said it is.
No. I was responding to her.
Which is why, when it's really important, I send it to Amy and say, I know it's not your job, but this is going to the governor. Would you
guys
proof
are
this?
Funny. Alrighty, sorry.
No, it's true.
Moving down, hang on. I'm got to scroll down quite a bit. Okay, membership. Board meetings, we talked about those. We now have headings at each one of those: time of meetings, place of meetings, rules of order, copies of agenda. The 7 days, remember it came up last time, the 7 days is statutory. We put those on there. The 72 hours, I could not find a statutory authorization for that. I think that's just because we wanted to make sure you had plenty of time to review them before it comes. Like I said, it was probably implemented back when we actually printed off copies of everything and delivered them to your houses. So, but I still think that's a good practice.
Absolutely.
I think it's very good. So, moving down, starting with, this is BEC, policy BEC, executive sessions and closed sessions it'll be. The closed sessions part was kind of meshing together. So Karen Castor-Dental provided some suggestion, which I implemented earlier today when I was preparing for our meeting. Basically two. The first one is closed sessions. These are the same things you had before. Closed sessions are discussions among the school board of Orange County and the superintendent designee related to collective bargaining. And then I did another subsection B, about closed sections about security and fire safety systems. So that way they're separated, so it's clear that you can have a closed session on collective bargaining and one on safety plans. And then it just delineated a little bit better. And I know the formatting's here a little bit wonky, but when you look at the clean copy, it all works out nicely. So I thought that was a very good suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Castor-Dental. And then that language didn't really change much after that. This is the big portion that I changed for you in respect to your last meeting. We divided the public comment section into public input period, which is prior to the pre-agenda meeting. I defined what the pre-agenda meeting is so it's clear to the public, because we know what it means to us, but it may not be necessarily clear to the public. And then we talked about on items not on the school agendas, or not on the agenda for that particular meeting. That's when they have the public input period. And I put in parentheses there non-agenda items. I think that makes it a little bit more clear. Thank you again to Dr. Castor-Dental, who suggested putting non-agenda items. So even though it says that, I think it's if you know it's non-agenda items, it makes it a little bit more transparent. So basically now we have a public input period and we have a public comment period. So we're going to have to work on changing our terminology for that. We'll have to change the input cards, which I already have plans on doing, so that it makes it clear, the blue cards and the yellow cards. And I welcome your feedback on this particular, these particular changes.
The one significant change I had really wasn't language. I like the fact that you broke it out. We have the public input and then we have the public comment. I like the different terminology, easy enough for us to get the hang of, and it makes sense. The one's input and one's comment on something that's in front of us. Where I got tripped up a little bit is I went down further under 3, allotted time for speakers, and C for allotted time deals with both public input and public comment, and D deals with both. And so I was wondering, from a structure standpoint, does it make sense to explain public input and the whole process and then public comment? Or do we mix them in where part of allotted time for speakers is only for public input and parts for public comment? And so this is just a structure question. Signing up to speak, it's both. Germane topics is really only for public input, but then I think code of civility is for both. 7, 8, or is there a way, since we start with one, we go to the other, is there a way to distinguish that these are for both so that we don't have to write them twice? It's just it's kind of more of an organizational.
Maybe in the allotted time for speakers, maybe adding for public input and or public comment, like putting that in the topic and the title, or no? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we deal with it right there in the title, so when you're reading it, it just, to me, it kind of flowed sequentially. We were talking about public input, then we went to public comment, and then we started talking about details of how public input and public comment is handled. I don't know. It might have just been late. This was like the last thing I did last night, and I think this was the last point I got to, and I was trying to figure out if.
And my thought process when I
Yeah.
was going through this was to do the exact same thing, but then it became very redundant because
Yeah,
we're doing
no.
the same. It's 3 minutes no matter what,
Right.
and it's signing up to speak no matter what, and so that's kind of where I was as well.
Right. And the only other thought I had is if that came first, that you dealt with this stuff. But then, no, it makes more sense this way because you have to understand what is the difference. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any? Member Colbert?
Just, I like that we're adding that because I think this in particular needs to be as clear as possible for the public because it has been confusing. So I appreciate all the work in making this very clear and very transparent.
And I believe it was your suggestion to change it to public input and public comment, so I appreciate
It
that
makes
too.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
So, but I appreciate everybody's input. It's really made this much better.
I got a request from the Council of Great City Schools this past Friday. No, actually, it came on a Saturday night, at about 8 o'clock, asking if any of the member organizations could send how we deal with public input, and a specific number of questions. And this work was really helpful, and breaking that out, made it very, very easy to explain. Well, we have two processes, and they're slightly different, and here's why. So I think, the effort of clarifying these two was helpful just to me, being able to explain an outsider in an email for them to be able to share with whatever district is struggling with this issue. So I agree. Yeah. And other than just trying to figure out, is there a structural way to change them, I don't have any comments. I thought it was spot on. Member Castellanos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you scroll back to the top where it says public input? There. I wonder if, I was trying to put myself in the position of a member of the public trying to read this.
Would it help if I took the markup off?
No.
No.
No, I meant when it's full.
Okay.
When it's all prepared.
Right.
But to me, the main difference between the public input and public comment is on the agenda and non-agenda. So I wonder if in the
Maybe putting
highlighted
it
part,
in that putting agenda and non-agenda in the title.
I don't even know if public input period prior to pre-agenda meeting, if we take out maybe prior to pre-agenda and just put public input period on non-agenda items.
I agree. Because that's more, when it happens doesn't mean anything to somebody when they read this.
Right.
What we want them to know when they see this section, oh, this is when I want to talk about something that's not on the agenda. So I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Okay,
Anybody
good, thank you.
disagree with that minor change? Yeah. Very good.
Okay.
And the when, you find out when you read it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other changes? Any other suggestions? Any other kudos?
All right. So we'll move on.
I was giving a kudo. I
Oh,
think we are
sorry.
finally there. Thank you for this
Yes.
journey.
It's been a journey. All righty. So moving forward, now we have the board members' insurance liability. We're recommending that this be appealed because we've already added in its policy and BDC above. So I think we have a lot of policies that are redundant, and in our policy revision process, I'd like to see where we can combine them where it makes sense, and make sure that they're all where they're supposed to be. So it's easier for the public to find and also for our employees and staff to find. And I believe that brings my portion to an end.
That was excellent. Thank you all for your patience with me. All right, if there's no further comments on this, Member Castellanos.
You should know by now, Madam Chair, to look this way when you think you're going to end the meeting.
I did, I looked over.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the signing up to speak. And if we have the same procedure for students versus the general public. I know that we ask the general public to state their name and address, and
We do. And so what I was going to add, and I'm sorry, that's something else I meant to add. When I revised those public comment cards, my intention was to put a checkbox there that says it's a student. Usually when we have a student sign up to speak, it's obvious that they're a student, and somebody will write on there, usually School Board Services writes on there that student, so we know not to ask them for their address, because we're trying to keep all that personally identifiable information out of the public as much as possible. But I'd like this time when they sign up to speak to actually check, I am a student, so that way we know for sure that we're not going to read the address out loud.
great. And also that I don't think they need to also share which school they're at, so they just their name.
Great,
Yeah.
great point.
Or even just their first name.
And
No,
they don't
that-
have to share their name if they don't want to.
No, that's a really good point, thank you.
already have it anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be on the card, but we don't want them in front of a mic on something that's on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
where somebody can find out who they are, where they go to school. No, we don't want that risk. No,
Unless they
No.
want to share it.
completely agree.
Is just having their first name appropriate or adequate when they share just at the mic, my name is Kim?
Well, I think the suggestion was if they want to share their name, they can. If they don't
No
want
name
to.
at all? Okay,
But I can put that on the card too.
okay.
But I could add language to that on the public input card that says you don't have to share your name or your
Yeah.
school.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And when I get these cards, it needs to be fairly prominent so that or somebody needs to kick me. Whoever's sitting next to me, Member Felder, that'll be your job. If I ask them for their name. And Ms. Emvold, yeah. But I think thank you, good catch. Anything else? Anything from our 3 members that are remotely participating? All right. Member,
Nope.
go ahead.
No, just fine, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Ms. Emvold? That concludes your
I am
work?
done, yes. I
Thank
get to
you.
pass on now.
All right. Yeah, right? But I'm good about doing that.
I'm gonna win. I spray everything in the process. Yeah, no. I know, because now it's gonna be. It's really
Ms. Lindsay, welcome. Thank you. For the benefit of the public, let me just introduce, for those who don't know, Ms. Lindsay. She is the board's auditor. She works directly for the board under the oversight of an external audit committee, which has incredible representation on it from great organizations across our community that have volunteered. These individuals have volunteered their time to help us oversee the operations and the finances of Orange County Public Schools. So Ms. Lindsay is independent of the administration and reports directly to the board. With that, she's going to report to us on the scope and the plan for the ESE audit that this board requested about, I want to say maybe 6 weeks ago, approximately 6 to 8 weeks ago. Ms. Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school board. I am here today to engage in a discussion with you about this audit that you are requesting to make sure that we design it to meet the requirements that you have and that our objectives and scope and methodology are appropriate. At the end of the meeting, once we have had that discussion and we've tweaked any of the approach that we've got outlined to show you to reflect your wishes, then the next steps would be to have the audit committee at its meeting quite handily next week to approve an amendment to this year's audit plan, and then we would bring that to you at your April 13th meeting. Won't stop us from proceeding with the work, you understand, but there's a process to be followed there as well. So thank you very much for having me here today, and we will get started. So first of all, as a good auditor, we always want to start with the objective of the audit. In meeting with you and talking with you and listening to the board work session from January, and also looking through some of the common themes that have come out in the communications, I think, we've distilled the audit objective to basically document and analyze and evaluate what's going on presently in certain areas of the ESE program, which we can bring our skills to. Our evaluation period would be the last complete school year, because sometimes data is easier to obtain and analyze for a complete year than it is for a partial year. But we'll also look at current state as well, and we do plan to look at this year's budget allocations and do some work in some schools that addresses what's happening on the ground now. We will do, you know me, data analysis and interviews and review of documentation. The data is really very, very critical to this, and we're fortunate we are such a data-rich organization. We do have access to a lot of good information that we should be able to work with. But what we want to do here is to confirm that we're accomplishing your objectives in this audit. The financial analysis that we're going to talk about in a bit more detail coming up will focus on, like I said, the prior school year as well as current actual expenditures. We'll also look at the same with regard to professional development, what happened in the prior school year and what's on the calendar and available and being accessed presently in the current school year. And we will look at current processes as well. Okay, so a list of topics was compiled by the Office of the Chief Academic Officer from emails that you folks forwarded to her, I believe primarily the chair, as well as interviews with you. And that detailed list was compiled and summarized into commonly recurring themes, the things that came up most often. There were a lot of different things mentioned, but generally speaking, they fell into groups of common topics. From that list, we went through and identified 4 areas where we believe our team can focus our resources and talents to help you in what you're trying to achieve. So those are on the screen in front of you, and I'm going to talk about each one of them separately in more detail. In approaching this work, a lot of what we have to do is going to be done at the school level. I don't have to tell you folks how many schools we have, but we don't want this audit to go on forever. So we will use a sampling plan in order to accomplish our work. A sample of schools. The sample will be representative of the characteristics I've bulleted on the slide in front of you. But we're doing it this way to avoid any skewing of results where representation from one element of our population is not in proportion to the entire population. So, for example, we wouldn't want to look only at one type of school or one learning community or the ones that are achieving the best success with their students or the ones that are getting the most complaints. You know, any slanting of the characteristics of the sample in one direction or another would make any conclusions we might want to draw questionable. So we're going to strive, working with data, to have a good representative sample of schools. And in order to do that, then we will look for that sampling into the depths of what we're going to talk about in each of the 4 areas I touched on a moment ago. First, we're going to look at use of financial resources. We're going to try to address the questions that are on the slide about what funding is provided and how it's allocated. We're going to see how is oversight provided at either a district or a school level. And we're going to look at both school-based expenditures and district-based expenditures because, as you know, it takes both elements to have a successful ESE program. We're going to do a high-level analysis on the budgeting process for all schools, but the detailed analysis I mentioned earlier will be for the sample of schools. And we're going to look for correlations, if it's there, of any budget management practices at schools with other factors, such as educational performance and compliance, with a goal of helping to identify better practices. The next area of interest is professional development. The questions to be addressed here include how much and what type of training is offered and who attends it. What do attendees say about it? How is the availability of training communicated? And what type of content is in training training that is not labeled ESE specific, but as we all know, every classroom instructor needs to have some ESE understanding in order to manage the students that are included in those classrooms. So again, this is a lot of data analysis, but rather than some of the things that can be made as a statement in a broad sweeping way, we'll find out what's offered and whether it's taken or not and what the content is. The next area is the use of paraprofessionals. Here we have to be respectful of the requirements for the collective bargaining agreements. But within that process, we'll also look at what happens in individual schools in certain sets of circumstances. We'll talk to school-based administrators and paras and teachers in some cases. So we'll try to find out, as I said earlier, what's happening on the ground in the schools with regard to how the paraprofessionals are deployed.
Let me pause for just a minute.
Of course.
Vice Chair Gould, I see, I see your name here, but that might not be you. It is? Did you want to comment or ask a question at this time? I'm sorry. Vice Chair Gould?
Sorry, my computer was trying to restart and I didn't want it to do that.
No.
No, I can wait till the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Back to you. Thank you.
Okay, fine. The last major area of interest is the IEP process. We're going to look to see what is documented as an IEP process, and then is it followed, and is it consistent from school to school. We're going to look at how the process is communicated to school staff and to families, by what means and how frequently it's communicated. And we're going to try to compare what we discover about what those processes are in the schools with any data we can get about trends in either the types or volume of complaints that are received. So I don't know if there will be a correlation there or not, but we're going to try and see if anything shows up once we have our information with regard to the IEP process. I know the district does have an IEP process and a flow chart and some materials, but we'll find out, what's happening in the individual schools and whether that's being used or not, and whether it's being used consistently. And then when we're finished with this and are in the reporting stage, whenever possible, we will provide you with benchmark data from comparable Florida school districts. We're going to see what we can get that will be enlightening and informative. And we will obtain management responses to the audit and include them with the reports when they come to you. And we will issue reports on each segment of the audit as it's concluded, so that, this will be a pretty big audit, but we don't want to wait to communicate information until the entire thing is finished, if we can provide information that management can use and act on in a more timely manner. So as we conclude each segment of the audit, we will move forward with the report on that segment. And that's an overview of the process that we're proposing, and I welcome your comments and feedback.
Thank you. Excellent job in the presentation, putting it together and summarizing it for the board. Let's go to Member Gould.
Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful way you have put together this audit. I think it's going to gain a lot of insight for us. One of the things that I wanted to bring to the board's attention that Ms. Lindsay and I discussed in my briefing is I had asked her to look to see if there were any current assessment tools that may be used already either in the evaluation and assessment process that we might be able to get a broad set of data on how some of these ESE trainings and implementations happen. And so she was going to go ahead and investigate that. That's just something that I wanted to share that I had asked for. And I think it would be great if we have any of that data to be able to maybe look at it as a resource in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and in response to that, I did meet with Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Schuler, and there was a discussion about that, and I guess I'll let Dr. Vasquez or Dr. Jenkins address that, but there may not be as much useful information there as we might hope in the present time, but I'll let Dr. Vasquez.
Who wants to respond?
So just so the board is clear, when it comes to the audit process, we worked very hard so that no one would be able to say staff are influencing your auditor. And so everything that she's able to quantify through her audit process is what is in the audit plan. That does not mean that staff are not looking into other areas of concern that were brought up either by parents or by board members. Our ESE department and teaching and learning department are working in those areas as well, but separate and apart from your independent auditor.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins.
Yes, and then
Dr. Vasquez?
In relation to using the evaluation tool for this year, we have been very careful to let our principals and other staff that evaluate our teachers to look at evaluations this year through the lens of compassion and grace because of the pandemic and all of the constraints and additional obstacles our teachers are facing. So the evaluation data that you would see this year may not yield the information that you are requesting because of the impact of the pandemic.
Thank you.
I
Member
also
Gould,
believe
follow
that
up?
last year
Yes.
assessments were suspended, so.
Member Gould?
Thank you. That's very helpful and insightful. My kind of question, without it being punitive, is: did we have any questions in the regular assessment process about professional development for ESE and or observation of ESE, not just ESE classes, but because so many of our kids are mainstreamed in the general classroom, and to see if we could get trends. Understand that the last year and this year won't yield that, but may provide some ongoing data. And again, not to be punitive, just to kind of track and see if there are gaps in, communication or receiving information or consistencies in implementation of training and that kind of thing.
Dr. Vasquez?
We can certainly take a look at the professional development, those individuals that have participated in the PD, and then look at implementation in the classrooms. The use of the evaluation tool for this year or last year will not yield data that is truly reflective, as we have been very careful to give teachers the benefit of the doubt when we are walking classrooms and evaluating them because of the constraints. One example would be walking around the classroom and monitoring, which prior to the pandemic was a very common research-based practice. But current guidance from CDC is that they remain as much as possible in the front of the classroom and not circulate. For that reason, using the evaluation results for this year, I believe, would not give a true indication of whether the strategies from the PD teachers have attended or have actually transferred and have been appropriately applied in the classroom.
Great. Thank you very much.
Member Vasquez, thank you. That was very clear and informative. Let's go to Member Casterdental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for such a great outline and presentation. And I can hear the elements that I brought to your attention. I don't know if others did as well, but that you included in that. I have a couple questions. How many schools do you hope to sample?
We haven't determined the sample size yet. I'm going to be getting data from the ESE department to analyze in helping us determine that size, but I can communicate that to you once we've done our plan.
Okay. I didn't know when you said that it would be representative of the school community, learning communities, and like elementary, middle, and high school, if you meant that you would get each of those kinds of schools in each of those learning communities, or if the random sample would provide the best method. I don't know. So I didn't know if that was your intention, but you'll figure that out.
Yes, and I'll
Okay.
communicate that back to
Okay.
you. But I wouldn't anticipate having one of each type of school in each learning community, but we haven't completed our sampling plan yet.
Another question is, are you only looking at the school level for this whole audit, just at the school sites themselves, and not in other like the ESE department or student services or teaching and learning? We're just looking at how it happens at the school.
No, we are also looking at district level activities as well, but the individual site visits about what happens in the deployment of paraprofessionals or how the IEP process is accomplished at the schools, particularly if a parent or guardian is unhappy with the IEP meeting or wants to have some changes made, things of that sort. There is an appeal process that the district has established where if someone is unhappy at the school level, they can come up to the district level, and district level ESE staff will sit in on or hear the concerns. We don't know to what extent that process is followed with fidelity. So we will be looking at both school level activities and district level activities. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And then one final question is when you're interviewing people on the ground, this whole last year has kind of thrown a wrench into what kind of information you'll be gathering if you're looking at practices and trends. So I just want to make sure that we're cognizant that when we ask in our interviews, and they are asked to share the practice from the last year, that we go back farther. You know, how is it? Was it different 2 years ago before the shutdown and the pandemic? I just want to make sure that we are able to target practices that are not affected by the pandemic.
Yes.
That's going to be, I guess, real difficult to audit. I would imagine that there's a lot of difference, and a lot of problems can be attributed to the pandemic, and it'll be hard to tease those out. So I don't know how you're going to go about gathering that kind of information over the past year and have it be reflective of what we normally do.
I agree that it's not going to be a straightforward process, but I think as long as we're dealing with personnel that have been here pre and during the pandemic, we ought to be able to get some insights. Definitely the world since a year ago is not at all the same as what it was previously, and there is a valid reason for things to be more difficult now, especially for the ESE community.
Okay,
Yes.
that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Casterdental. Member Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you. Your 4 areas that you've targeted just are precisely, I think, what we have expressed our concern with. So I think this plan is fantastic. I just had a couple questions. For paraprofessionals, you're going to be looking at professional development, and then separately you're looking at paraprofessionals and how they're used within the schools. Are you going to be also, when you're looking at professional development, looking at the training for paraprofessionals as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, as far as the IEP process, when you say that there's a sequence of steps through the district for the process of an IEP, are you also going to be looking at how that IEP is followed after the IEP is written in place, how well it's being followed in the classroom?
No, my team, we're not trained educators,
Okay.
and we're really not qualified to assess what's happening with the classroom itself and what the teacher is doing with the students. If the board has an interest in that type of an assessment, we can discuss alternative ways of getting some of that assurance for you, but it's not something that's in my department's wheelhouse.
Okay. And when you are looking at the IEP process, are you also going to be looking at 504s and EPs for gifted students as well?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
504s and EPs, education plans for gifted students as well?
Education plans for gifted, yes, you had mentioned that, and that is included. 504s are not really considered part of the ESE population, and we were not intending to look at 504 plans.
Okay. And my last question would just be, or not really a question, but just when we look at professional development, when we find out, I think a really valuable thing to find out would be why are some of these classes not being taken and some of the professional development. I know if we talk to teachers, they'll be able to tell you that. I've heard from some teachers that sometimes when the classes come available, they are filled up really fast and then they can't get in. And so that might be valuable information to have as to why they can't or why they're not taking these classes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Let's hear from Member Lopez. Member Lopez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Jacobs. I have 2 questions. The first one is the use of paraprofessionals. Are they going to be interviewed anonymous, or are we going to have, the names, and it's going to be very open on the responses from the paraprofessionals? That's the first one.
We will know with whom we're speaking, but when we report the results, it will just be in the aggregate without attribution to any individual by name. It'll just be information at that point once it gets into the reporting stage.
So the administration, I'm not going to be aware of the names of the participants, of the names of the paraprofessionals?
You mean like the principal?
Mm-hmm.
Well, usually when we're on a campus, the principal knows. We don't just, surprise people, but we would have to make arrangements to speak with individuals that fit their schedule. Obviously, we don't want to intrude on the educational process. So I imagine, yes, there will be some understanding that we're on campus and that we need to meet with staff members when it is appropriate in their workday schedule.
And the district select the paraprofessionals that will be interviewed or are appointed by the administration?
We would be requesting, as the audit team, to meet with particular individuals at a campus. So if we were visiting Happy Valley Middle School, we would tell Principal Smith that we'd like to meet with, staff members, Jones, Brown, and Smith. So it wouldn't be a situation where the administration would be telling us with whom we could speak. The only coordination with the administration would be making sure we didn't disrupt anyone's workday, that we were dealing with people in a time when they could speak. And we may
Okay.
do it,
Thank you.
by email. It may not, some of it may be able to be done via email and survey as opposed to interviews. We haven't completed that. I wanted to wait till I had your input before I solidified, our total approach here, but it may not necessarily require, visiting a classroom or a lounge and speaking one-on-one with some of the individuals now that we have all these virtual tools and other options.
Okay. And are parents part of these interviews or not?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's going to be all.
Thank you, Member Lopez. This would probably be a good time just to clarify a couple of points for anyone from the outside who is monitoring, following this. Again, this is an audit. It's not an investigation. It is designed to be based on data that's available, that's concrete, that's not opinion. In terms of one of the things that I know I've heard and other board members have heard is complaints that paraprofessionals are being pulled out of their ESE classrooms or their ESE support and used as substitutes. And that will be something that Ms. Lindsay will be able to verify she will not have to interview people to determine how often paraprofessionals are substituting versus how often they are in their assigned class. So a lot of what she'll be doing will be based on, as you mentioned, virtual data that's available. And that gives us much more solid, concrete information, but it also limits some of the things that she will be able to look at. So she's looked very carefully at all the issues we've raised, and she's defined what is auditable. And so there will still be, I know there will be outstanding questions. And that's where involving Dr. Jenkins and her staff and the ESE department to answer some of the other questions that will likely linger are just not a function of auditing. So I do want to speak to that issue. I had a couple of questions. And I think this falls into the latter category of reviewing, analyzing, but not auditing. Use of, one of the things that I hear is IEPs that define certain resources that a student needs, certain tools that a student needs, but they're not provided them. I don't know if that falls into an auditable area or not. Consistency in the use of ESE funds from one school to the next. I know you're going to look at how schools are using the ESE funds, but there is some flexibility in the use of ESE funds for certain types of resources that might benefit ESE students and regular ed students. And so if there is a way of collecting the data, but also looking at how great is that difference from one school to the next, that might give the administration and the board some clearer picture of what we might want to emphasize more strongly about the use of those dollars. Professional development by school, that was brought up, but I would be interested as you're looking at these schools to see how different is the use or how many of our teachers are taking advantage of it school by school. I think it was one of the board members just mentioned it had to do with there just not being access to it. But I would be curious if there's also just kind of a stronger push in some schools than others, if we're able to gain that. The other thing I do want to mention for anybody who was listening to the presentation, I want to make sure that when Ms. Lindsay mentioned the sampling plan, and she talked about we're not just going to take all of our highest performing schools and look at those, because that would skew the audit, or the schools with the most complaints, because that would skew the audit. She also did cover, she is going to look at schools that have the most complaint and schools that have the least complaints. So for anybody watching this who may think that what we're going to do is just look at the middle of the road schools so that we can avoid looking at difficult situations, that is not the goal of this board. That is not the goal of the auditing department. It is not to ignore problems, but it is also not to intentionally inflate the magnitude or the frequency of those problems. So the approach that she's taking, look at the problems, the schools with the most complaints and the least complaints, will give us a lot more information than look at the middle. And the same approach she's taking, look at those schools that are performing the best, are ESC students. Which ones are doing the best? Which ones are doing the worst? Look at the two extremes, and it will give us a much better picture of what's happening and what our opportunities are. So I just wanted to take a minute to call that out, because I think it's spot on the right way to do it. I'm not sure that I would have thought of that. I would have just probably gone with more random, but I think that approach is going to give us much more meaningful data and help us see how we can best improve. So I wanted to commend you for that. And now let me go to Member Felder.
Actually, I think you kind of hit it on the nose when you talked about her responsibility as an auditor to look at, make sure the finances are where they need, and maybe some of the other issues that are in concern may need to be up under another kind of investigative process or what have you. Also, I'm in tune with Member Johanna Lopez when she talked about when the questions have to be asked or how you're going to do it, because here again, I think integrity needs to be at the helm, and fear should not be in the hearts of teachers or paraprofessionals, or principals, anybody, for fear that they're going to be audibly reprimanded or whatever. Because until we face what the real issue, we have to be truthful about it all so that the situation can get fixed. And if there's some situations going on, then we have an auditing department to look at it financially, where that needs to go, and all these other things will get resolved. But I think that truth and integrity needs to be at the helm of what we're doing. And I believe in the integrity of this board, and it is my hope and my confidence that it's going to be done in the right way, so that we can get whatever the situations, the problems are, we can get it resolved, because we have to get it resolved. So I appreciate your work, and I hope we understand this is not a quick fix. It's going to take some time to do what we need to do, but those of us that are sitting up here, we've been voted in this position, so you have the trust that we're going to have integrity about what we're doing. So thank you so much. I didn't need to say a lot because you had said most of what I was going to say, but anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Castrodeno, recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Lopez brought up something that I want to comment further on, and that is when you are interviewing employees, I think it's important that all of our employees know that we're going to embark on this audit and what the purpose is, and that we're looking to see how we can improve, and that and reiterate that it is not an investigation, and otherwise it is, you may not get the answers you want. Like Member Felder said, we want them to be honest and feel safe with sharing, their experiences or opinions or thoughts. And it might also help if there is some communication from the chair to the employees, all the employees, that Some people might be asked to provide information, and that it is the board looking into this and not necessarily the superintendent. Because we do have different roles. So if there's another way to assure that they have some privacy, or maybe over sampling the employees at the site, so that they do have that kind of, there's not just a few people, they can tell who said something, so that they have another level of comfort with sharing. Just some ideas, if you want to be, if you want them to be honest and feel safe, I think we need to do a couple more steps to ensure that. I don't know if the chair would like to put out an overview of what's going to happen, and some people will be selected and our purpose, but I want to minimize the rumors and the fear that will go quickly from around the school campus, like, oh, they're here. Yeah, oh, did you see who got called? Uh-oh. So just some way to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Castellanos. Actually, I think putting out something from the board to our employees is a good idea to explain what we're doing, why we're doing. I think that's an excellent suggestion. We'll have to work through exactly what that looks like and make sure everyone is comfortable with it. Dr. Jenkins.
Yeah, that was going to be my thought, Madam Chair. I want to be careful not to compromise what the audit department has as their process in place, because it's not the first time that they've had to speak with individuals. When they audit, there will be employees that are questioned or interviewed. And so I want to be careful not to somehow compromise Ms. Lindsay's position as auditor. Every time she audits, employees are spoken to about some issue. And quite often audits turn out things that are not always going to be super positive, that managers and supervisors may not be happy about. So I want to make sure we're not tying her hands, making this seem like it's extremely different than her audit function, because every time she audits, she has to deal with employees. And so certainly would love for some communication to make sure folks feel like they're not going to be suffer some retribution. But I want everybody to understand, every time audit goes out or audit deals with something, there are individual employees that are engaged. Want to be clear on that, and certainly happy to assist in any way that we can. The second thing I wanted to mention, it occurred to me when Ms. Enville actually pointed it out. I don't want any parent who might be listening to think somehow the confidentiality of IEPs are going to be looked over by auditors who do not have the expertise nor a reason under FERPA to look at that information. I want to reassure everyone the audit function will steer clear of individual information of students. We can actually redact some of that information if they want to pull some samples, but I don't want anyone to think that auditors are going to be looking at their children's information as well. For the most part, I have every confidence that the board and their independent auditor can look at all of these issues without overemphasizing. I think too many announcements, too much communication also raises a red flag and makes people even more anxious about it when they don't have to be. So I would just offer that caution as well. We have audit every week, every month. We go through audits because we've got a very competent department that's quite capable of getting through the process appropriately.
Yes, and if I may, Madam Chair.
Of course.
I also I appreciate the comments that are being made and where they're coming from, but I also want to say that the audit plan itself is not solidified, and auditors have different tools in their toolboxes to obtain information. So interviews is one, but we also have the ability to do surveys, and we have the ability to do emails and different means and methods that are more anonymous, or if not anonymous, at least less visible on a school campus, which I hear coming from Member Lopez and Member Castor-Dental. So, we have not solidified this plan yet, but I do appreciate Dr. Jenkins' remarks, because every day, all day, my team is talking to people all over the district in all different levels and roles and functions. And by and large, all of the jokes about auditors notwithstanding, we get excellent cooperation, and people, understand that we all have a job to do, and we have a very good relationship with people. So we're nice folks. We still get the job done, but we're,
Yeah. Very excellent points. Excellent points.
yeah.
Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the Audit Committee for all the hard work that they've done on this. I think this is going to be good for our parents and for our district, and definitely for the school board. I just wanted to share that I agree with Member Felder and Member Castrodental. I do feel like we need to make sure that they understand this is an investigation, that we're really just trying to get authentic information. And unless they're honest with us, we won't be able to fix any issues that might arise from this audit. But I believe that that's been taken care of by Dr. Jenkins. So I think I'm good. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Member Gallo. I want to say this carefully. I'm not sure how much the advisory committee has been involved in developing this plan. So I didn't want to, I am so grateful to the men and women on the advisory committee for the time that they donate to us. I don't want this to be misconstrued. But the work that's gone into this has been Ms. Lindsay's effort and her commitment and her time and her expertise. So not taking away from what they bring to the table, but I do want everybody to recognize how much she is dedicated to making sure that she understands what the board's concerned about, what the public's concerned about, what we need to know, and how to do it in the best way possible. So I want to thank you again for that. Anything else from board members? All right, we have a plan.
All right.
And we understand that you'll modify things as you go along to accomplish the goal the best you can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Jenkins, anything further for the board?
Nothing further, Madam Chair, nothing further. These masks are making me,
Pardon me?
nothing further, Madam Chair. You can't understand me with the mask on.
Oh, okay,
I'm sorry.
your mask, yes, I know, I started off that way. All right, nothing further from the board members? Then the meeting is now adjourned. The hour of 2:37.
Have a good afternoon.
Good
Have a great afternoon.